There are laws on the books today that can and will be applied to AI. So there's been, as we saw in the AI index report, a 6 times increase over 6 years in litigation related to AI specific cases. I
Mhm.
expect that to double, if not more, as more and more lawyers understand the harms that are unaccounted for by those who are not thinking about governance properly.
I'm Ryan Heath, and welcome to the AI Leadership Lab, where I interview C-suite leaders about their AI journeys. We cover what's working, where they're getting stuck, how they pivot, and the lessons they take from the losses. Joining us now on AI Leadership Lab is Miriam Vogel, the president and CEO of EqualAI, a nonprofit created to promote artificial intelligence governance. Welcome to the show, Miriam.
Thanks so much for having me, Ryan.
Now, Miriam also has a book out October 28, Governing the Machine, that we'll get into later in the conversation. I was hoping we could start on AI literacy and the trust questions that you're so involved in, Miriam. Is that okay?
I love it.
Excellent. Okay. Well, first up, I wanted to start with a data point, which is that around half of Americans say they're more concerned than excited about AI today. And that really feels like a pessimism that was different from how people received previous generations of digital tech and innovation. And so I wanted to get your view on why this big trust gap has emerged so quickly around AI.
Yeah, Ryan, thank you for getting right to the heart of it with this question. My concern is that people are not trusting AI because they don't know if it does deserve our trust. I think as the technology has rolled out, it has scaled enormously. And on top of that, we're hearing about these monumental $1 trillion investments. So both the speed at which it's become pervasive across society, as well as the messaging and headlines, have really given people an appropriate hesitation as to how they fit into this new AI ecosystem. On top of it, that language, that framing has not been matched with ideas about governance and ideas about AI literacy. And so while people are seeing it pop up around them, they don't really understand the technology and they don't understand how it can help them. They hear that it's going to change the economy, it's going to change the workplace. They also hear they're going to be replaced. So I think what we haven't done is address people's fears in a meaningful way in order to build the trust and demonstrate that this AI actually deserves our trust.
Yeah, I really feel that, am I going to get kicked to the curb factor is what's driving a lot of this. And that brings us directly to the next question, which is that you've said very often, actually, that trust is the currency of AI. And I wanted to not disagree, but like challenge or get you to dig into that a little bit, because it feels to me like some of the cowboy behavior from some of the very big AI players and companies contradicts that idea. So I guess in essence, I'm asking, are they getting away with behavior that undercuts trust and sometimes the law? And is it because some people are just kind of actually okay with that? That as long as they get what they want out of AI, they don't really mind who gets run over in the process.
Well, I think it depends what your end goal is. If your end goal is having people buy your product, yes, we're seeing epic investments here in AI technologies. However, we just talked about the trust gap. So I don't know that it is working. I don't know that people are buying what is being sold. We see in these companies where they're making multi-million-dollar, even billion-dollar investments, the senior executives are not using the AI systems. The general public is skeptical of these AI systems. And so if you're looking for signs as to whether or not this discussion of AI without marrying it with discussion of governance and trust is working, I would say we have clear indicators that it's not. To the alternative fact, though, if you look at the studies where AI has been deployed responsibly, when you have CEOs involved in its rollout, when you have accountability, you see absolutely different numbers. Where you have leadership involved in AI governance in a meaningful way, you see adoption, you see trust, you see AI working in the way that we hope it would.
And so we've got like sort of maybe joining these two ideas up. So AI governance in my mind is what you can do as the maker or the administrator and the operator of a given AI product or tool. And then AI literacy is a bit more of like the bottom-up approach, where you're giving people the tools to cope with whatever governance and whatever innovation is being thrown at them. Is that how you would define AI literacy, or do you mean something else by it?
Uh, Thank you for that question. And it's interesting. I see the top down, bottom up description. Generally, in my mind, I think of it as side by side. You cannot
Mhm.
have AI adoption without trust. You can't have trust without governance and communicating that you have that governance. You can't have people understanding how to do the governance or knowing that the system is governed well if you don't have AI literacy. And so, really, it's a hand in glove AI governance and AI literacy. And that's why our organization, EqualAI, is so focused on both of those very points. But how I define AI literacy and really have been working with a coalition of partners. As you may know, we're launching an AI literacy initiative
Mhm.
October 30th in DC, and then taking our show on the road across the US for now. But what we are all looking at AI literacy as is, first of all, most people do not know that they're using AI.
Mhm.
So I love to ask audiences, how many of you have used AI today? I'm still usually only getting about 50% raising their hands. But
Yeah.
when I ask them, does that mean you have not scrolled today? No
Mm.
GPS, no news feeds, no Spotify, then they all laugh and end up raising their hands. So first of all, good news, you're using AI. Second of all, I want to meet people where they are. And most audiences I talk to are afraid. And I think we have to meaningfully address that fear if we're going to get people excited and using AI. And so I think the second part of AI literacy is addressing the risks involved in a meaningful way. In our book, Governing the Machine, we break down all the fears and risks we know of into 9 different categories. And underscoring, these are all absolute risks that people should be considering:
Mm.
privacy concerns, hallucinations, environmental impact, workforce displacement. We can't pretend any of those are not real. And so instead, what we should be doing is acknowledging it, labeling it. What is it that makes you afraid of AI? And then let's talk about mitigation strategies so we can get to the third part. And the third part is, you will benefit from AI, your
Mhm.
community, your small business, your family. So let's give you use cases that are meaningful for you.
And then what sort of infrastructure is it going to take to get everyone to the level where, coping with AI and being good at it is a bit like learning how to read and write? Is it through our schools? Is this something where everybody in society is going to have to play a role or deliver some part of the education?
Everybody in society will have to play a role because we want everyone in society to benefit from AI. So, big picture, we know that AI learns from training data, from data sets and training. But on top of that, AI is constantly iterating. So, part of our push with AI literacy is to make sure more people are using AI, because that means AI, the systems, tools we're using, will hear and see more of us. If we're abstaining, and we are not in the training data, and we're not having it iterate and learn how to hear our voices and understand our use cases, it can't deliver for us. It can't ensure that we are safe, our uses are safe, and that our voices are being heard. Should the schools be involved? Absolutely. That is an area I'm very concerned about. My own daughter's school bans it instead of
Mhm.
teaching them, here are safe ways to use it, A,
Yeah.
and B, this is what cheating looks like, and this is what it looks like to use it as your thought partner so that it can support critical thinking instead of overtaking critical thinking. It's fair that everyone's worried about losing their cognitive abilities by relying on AI, but that
Yeah.
doesn't have to be the case. As Ryan, I'm sure you can tell and attest to, in the ways that you choose to use AI to support and certainly not replace you in the critical work you do.
That's a really good way of thinking about it. Like the way I internalize it is I should use AI to help with my second draft of something, not
Hmm.
outsource it to do my first draft.
Hmm.
So it can help me spot my own blind spots, or I'm lucky, I've been a journalist for a long time, so lots of my words are out there. It kind of actually knows how to produce something in my style, which is a bit scary,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
good at
Hmm.
the same time. And then I use it to like get to a better finish line rather than cheat my way to the finish line, let's say.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but now, one other smart thought that I wanted to ask you about was you
Yeah.
make the case in your book that we don't need to slow down innovation, we need to speed up responsibility. Is that sort of a view you arrived at kind of out of pragmatism because it's maybe the only way to get the companies to engage, or like a low regulation government to engage? Or is that actually your core belief about how innovation works, that you have to do it that way?
Actually, both are true. I am very, very practical in my approach. I don't pretend that we can change everything. We can't put laws on the books tomorrow. That's not the way it works. Um, I am very practical, though, in looking at the laws that currently are on the books. That's part of what we do in our book. That's part of what I do at EqualAI and working with senior executives, making sure people know there are laws on the books today that can and will be applied to AI. So there's been, as we saw in the AI index report, a 6 times increase over 6 years in litigation related to AI specific cases. I
Mhm.
expect that to double, if not more, as more and more lawyers understand the harms that are unaccounted for by those who are not thinking about governance properly. So I come to this from a former policymaker, as a lawyer, as a former general counsel. I'm sympathetic that companies are using this new technology that even its creators are figuring it out to some extent as we go. But there are frameworks that we have in place. There are frameworks we have from historical innovations that will be absolutely critical to use here. And what's interesting in our work with companies is we find there's a lot of similarity in the best practices. There is certainty in my mind as to what's good AI hygiene, and they all happen to be doing it. And even in the conversations with my co-authors on governing the machine, it was really gratifying to know that when we came together to align on best practices, one of my co-authors is a CTO at a bank. One came from Accenture. I
Mhm.
come from advising policymakers and companies in the US while they're in the UK. And yet we were in lockstep. Excuse me, as to what good governance looks like, both in how we advise it and what smart companies are doing.
Yeah, I hear you on that. It's almost one of the reasons why this podcast exists, which is that there's so much more in common across industries about how to use this well than there is a difference. And so people should be trying to learn from each other, even if you think, well, what do I care about a bank? Like, I still think there's a lot to learn from that. Can you maybe now give us an example or two, if you're feeling generous, about companies that you think are doing this sort of acceleration of responsibility well?
Yeah, yeah. So smart companies are not waiting, and I am privileged to work, excuse me, with several of them. Obviously, you mentioned the banks. I think they're some of the key players to work with. Some of my the banks that I get to work with are way ahead of everybody else because they
Mhm.
have been regulated with their AI use and other uses that overlap into their current AI uses. And so
Yeah.
they're some of the key partners to be thinking about when we're deciding what best practices are. They have had systems and infrastructure in place for years because obviously they cannot afford not to.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
they
there's
cannot have
also
an error rate. Like if they get it wrong, the whole economy is going down.
the economy and trust in the company. I mean, so both there's the public trust and accountability. There's also the brand trust. You know, most companies, I would say all, but if I'll caveat it as a lawyer and say most, would have a
Mhm.
hard time coming back from an epic failure in their trust mechanism if their AI created significant harms. They know that whether there's a law on the books specifically governing it or not, there's the courthouse that they need to be thinking of, and there's the court of public opinion. Um, and then there's companies that are really being creative and thinking not just how we do the base minimum, but how
Yeah.
can we use it to propel us? And one that really energizes me is Athena at PepsiCo, where she has led her team on every different level to think about how can AI make them a better partner, a better company, a better employer. They're
Mhm.
using it to upskill their employees across the board, and
Yeah.
not just for specific functions, but so that they can feel part of the new AI culture that they're creating as opposed to alienated and distrustful. They're
Yeah.
using it for environmental sustainability efforts in their farming. They're using it with their local mom and pop partners to help with supply chain orders and that sort of thing. So really not just being reactive and thinking about the bottom line liabilities and accountability, but being proactive in how can we get people excited about it and how can we use AI to do better.
Yeah. And that, well, actually, that feels like they're not just like accelerating the responsibility, they've shifted up another gear into AI is a competitive advantage because they're
You got
baking
it.
it into all these levels of the organization, but they're baking it in with people, not sort of onto the people.
with people and with good government measures in every step. So that's what you'll see a smart company doing, thinking of how to use AI in a way both to propel themselves, but also how to build trust. And another way that I think they're being so smart is thinking about their employees as their ambassadors, as and their key partners in their AI use and their success overall. If you're telling your employees, we care about you and we care about how AI is impacting you, and we want to make sure that you're feeling comfortable with it and that it's deployed safely, that's building trust with your employees, and that's felt by your consumers.
Yep. Yep. Now, not to be negative, but I can see a world as well where AI ethics could become marginalized, where it could get boxed in as like the new ESG, where either it sort of exists as an afterthought, the compliance exercise, or it's a thing that gets ditched as soon as there's some kind of financial or political pressure that's being applied to the CEO or to the company on the market or whatever. Do you sort of have a way around that? Is there a way that people can ingrain AI ethics so that it's really upstream and it's kind of like absolutely at the source of the stream, let's say?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, because it does come down to how do we make sure this is sustainable? And I think based on some of what we talked about, it will be. And certainly smart companies and leaders know that, political leaders, business leaders, thought leaders, because again, you get back to this competitive advantage and you also get back to the liability.
Okay.
So whether or not there's a federal government mandate conversation, regardless of that, you're going to want to make sure that your AI is not bringing liability. And if you're smart, you're going to think about how to use it to build trust. So how can we do that? It's being transparent. It's making sure you have accountability. I mentioned before, I think of it as good AI hygiene, making sure you are aware of how you're using AI. Survey the company. Any company who's telling me they're not using it, check again. You are using it. We are all really AI organizations now. Talk to your HR team,
We,
talk to your marketing team. You want to make sure you have full clarity on how you're using AI so that you can put in processes in place to prepare you for potential harms that can and
yeah.
will arise. We're talking about AI. It's going to learn new patterns, iterate. You have to have a method in place to account for model shift and new use cases you hadn't envisioned. These are things we know in advance today will happen, and you can put processes in place to catch them. So at the end of the day, if you have accountability and you're transparent about it, I think smart companies will and are making that public so that there can be this competitive advantage. They are building trust with their employees
Mhm.
and with their consumer base that this is something they have under tight controls. You can't say it's 100% effective because it's AI. And so part of that is being humble and saying, look, no one understands fully this technology, but we are doing our best to make sure that we're bringing it to you in ways that will support you and ways that will not harm you. And here's some of the measures we put into place. So I think the more consumers are asking for that, the more we have some standard best practices so people know what to be asking for, whether it's board members,
Perfect.
shareholders, general public, policymakers, aligning on those best practices and making sure they're standardized, whether it's because you're buying our book or a part of Equal AI or listening to this podcast. I think that's one of the best things we can do to make sure that companies are being smart about this in the short and long term.
And if we like touch on regulation for a second, obviously not a lot of what I would call hard regulation coming out of the US, but some state-based action. The EU has their AI Act. Other jurisdictions like Singapore are starting to move. As that sort of trend towards enforcement and actual baseline regulation does pick up, is there any trend or sub-trend that you think is particularly important that needs to be spread, or maybe one that is problematic that needs to be stopped because people are just kind of chasing the wrong things?
I think we are seeing, obviously, the lab of multiple different approaches, whether it's California and Utah, Colorado, as you mentioned, Singapore, the EU. I think one element that we need to be mindful of is some of these regulations are focused exclusively on the frontier foundation models,
Uh,
where that is hugely important, but most of what is used day to day in organizations is narrow AI,
Uh,
traditional AI, and that's an area where we can and need to have standardization. I think to the extent there's an alignment on definition and certain protocols. So, what I would hope and love to see is standardization across the country of the US, but across the globe on
mm,
what should be tested and when. For instance, if you're saying you have a 92% success
mm,
rate in identification of dermatological cancer, you have to also tell us for whom is that success rate? Because what I want people to be in a position to answer is for whom could this fail? Who are the populations that are not adequately represented? What are the use cases for which this was not used so that we can then do follow-up testing and
yeah.
know so that physician knows this patient in front of me is not necessarily included in that success rate. So I need to do additional testing and not just rely on the AI recommendation in this case.
Yep. And that's where numbers, maybe they don't lie, but they can be very misleading. Like that 92 and 8 situation, maybe that means 40% of one population is getting the error rate. And that sort of level is unacceptable. So point well taken there. Maybe sort of if we can finish by ending on a couple of questions about AI in the workplace now. We've talked around a lot of those issues, but for me, all of these sort of stories and themes come back to kind of questions around what it means to be human in the age of
Mm.
AI. And, as human leaders of an organization that is bringing more AI into the workflow, like how do you think leaders should be navigating the tension between taking advantage of AI's efficiencies, but then needing to be empathetic to all of those fears and trust problems that we spoke about at the beginning of the discussion?
I think smart leaders understand that there's an opportunity to do both. When we're talking about the government role, I think a huge role for government is ensuring we have AI literacy, ensuring we know what that means to be AI literate. If we're talking about workforce upskilling, right now, smart companies are doing that work internally. We mentioned PepsiCo and there's Walmart and so many others that are doing that work. Well, what are the best practices? If you're using a tool, if you're using a program, which are the right programs to be leaning on? So I think smart leaders are identifying which are those programs so that you can have both of those conversations. What are meaningful use cases that uh, enable me to do better with AI, as well as address these fear and risks? So if you have those conversations in your boardrooms and your C-suite, you're then ready to have those conversations with your employees. And that's another important part about good AI hygiene, being transparent about what the process is you've put in place. First of all, so that people know what the process and system is, how they fit into it, what they should be on the lookout for, because your employees are your front lines. If you're talking about AI, it's your call center, it's your customer
Mhm.
support, it's the people who are talking with your customers, wherever your AI use is, that are going to tell you if there's been a malfeasance, if there's been something gone awry.
Yeah.
So making sure they know, what does awry look like? What are you on the lookout for?
Yep.
Who do you contact? What's the process? I
Mm.
think smart leaders are talking about both elements of this, the opportunity and how each consumer and each employee can benefit. Now, we have to be honest, is there going to be displacement? Yeah. And what are they doing to make sure that people land well and to make sure their employees are prepared and can transform themselves to the extent possible into these new roles that will pop up in the AI economy?
Yeah. And on that kind of displacement question, like I think it's important to be realistic, where at some level, this is going to affect different job roles or different industries at different times. And I think there's a real risk that for the industries or the jobs that kind of get affected first, like clearly some junior roles are going to be affected before some other roles. It may well hit sort of marketing and coding and legal before others, for example. Is there a risk that because we just don't know enough or not enough people are practicing this good hygiene now, that we end up with something like sectoral rust belts where, you know, there is a bit of a wasteland in some areas because all the work you're doing didn't reach enough people quick enough, and the people in the second round are the ones who get it right. Sorry, that was a lot of thoughts to shove in.
No, I appreciate it. And Ryan, that's my very concern. I don't think we need to encounter that reality. I don't think it's a given. I think we're at this pivotal inflection point, and that's why you hear me trying to, make sure that we all are aware and we're all playing our role. That's why we're launching this AI literacy initiative on October 30th, and that's why we're doing this AI governance work. We are at a critical moment where we can make sure that people are prepared, that our companies are prepared, that our society is prepared, but only if we're intentional with AI literacy, with accountability and transparency and other key elements that can ensure we are prepared.
Well, I think you have a willing audience here at AI Leadership Lab. I'm certainly part of it. Miriam Vogel, thank you for joining AI Leadership Lab.
Thanks so much for having me, Ryan. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks for listening. 2 things before you go. First, if you'd like to appear on the show or know someone I should have on, you can find me through ryanheathconsulting.com. Finally, please tell a friend or colleague about AI Leadership Lab. Even better, leave a short 5-star rating or review on whatever platform you found this podcast. It'll help us reach more of the people who'd enjoy these tips and tricks. Thanks, and talk soon.